So just to be clear, both Seba and I, who are from Haiti, and Nakakande, by proxy, who's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, we are being actively attacked by Americans on this social media app.
After building a reputation as one of the most controversial TikTokers,
You're talking about sex because sex is a skill. How are young people supposed to learn how to do those things if they have no examples of it? And again, I offer you that can be a space where young people can learn how to perform sexual acts. It doesn't mean that they have to start having sex right away.
Toya Oracle became a household name because of his derogatory comments.
The expectation that homeless people control their urges while you, a house person, has the privilege of masturbating whenever the fuck you want to comes from a place of power and privilege.
I did not want to talk about Toya Oracle because I already know I'd be labeled an oppressor. One, I did not want to have this conversation because of that. Two, I didn't want to have the conversation because I feel like with Toya Oracle, if you call their name 3 times, they pop up like Beetlejuice.
From making deepingly disturbing statements about children and consent,
I want people to really ask themselves, what disturbs your spirit so much about the idea of a child also being a sexual being?
to going viral for demanding reparations from anyone who happened to own more things than him.
If you are lighter than me, you are colorist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you are thinner than me, you are fatphobic. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations.
To faking a disability,
as a deep dark skin, fat black, trans disabled person,
doxing his own mother,
you need to call the cops on your own child when you know what happens to black people in this country.
and claiming to be a victim of genocide.
My experiences with genocide. As a victim and survivor of genocide, as I'm experiencing genocide.
And finally, getting banned again and again across multiple platforms until there was almost nowhere left for him to go. This is the complete story of how Toya Oracle's harmful ideology and dangerous statements.
So they don't have to expose themselves in public? Wrong. Impulse control, believing that everybody has impulse control, is actually ableism.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The US government, like I said before, children have had access to graphic materials since the beginning of time. Since fucking Babylon, okay? Before the internet, we were making sculptures. We were drawing on fucking cave walls. You don't think that human beings weren't drawing sexual acts, weren't sculpting sexual acts?
Led to his total downfall.
The age of consent laws in Western societies were always created to criminalize Black and brown and indigenous people.
Toya Oracle stirred the internet when he posted a video on TikTok.
We need to decriminalize public nudity because when we criminalize it, it disproportionately affects people like children who do expose themselves in public. If you've never made it in school,
Asking his audience what they think about children having access to.
I want people to really ask themselves, what disturbs your spirit so much about the idea of a child also being a sexual being? What disturbs your spirit so much about the idea of a child watching a consensual act? What meaning are you attaching to that act?
What came out of his mouth was not a small slip, not a quote taken out of context, and not a poorly worded opinion that could have been cleaned up with a simple clarification. Instead, it was a premeditated word that was against the value every parent has held for years. He pushed the argument further, insisting that children possess a natural awareness of sexuality and having access to porn is something every child should be allowed to do. According to him, the idea that children should be completely shielded from discussions about sex and consent isn't a universal truth, it's a cultural construct. In his own words, it's a Western colonial framework that distorts reality rather than reflecting it.
Understanding my body, understanding how to engage in sexual acts safely, understanding having porn media literacy. I would rather have that than to be pushed into a marriage at an early age, to be pushed into, having X for procreation.
But here is one thing Toya doesn't seem to understand about children and pornography. Pornography distorts the brain in ways that most people never fully grasp. When you're exposed to it over a long period of time, it physically alters brain structure, disrupts brain function, and as a direct consequence, changes behavior. However, as Toya continued pushing these ideas across his videos, normalizing the exposure of children to sexual images, videos, and topics, Many parents flooded his platform, child safety advocates began posting responses, and creators who had never once mentioned Toya Oracle before were making call-out videos overnight.
So as a CSA survivor, jokes aside about the Toya Oracle person, I want to talk about this aspect of like them saying that little kids should have access to corn, because as someone who went through non-contact CSA, which included exposing me to pornography at a really young age, it damaged me and damaged my like sexual development a lot, actually.
A consensual act. What meaning are you attaching to that act?
Hear me out. Let's bring back public executions. I'm just putting it out there. What the fuck is this nigga talking about? I'm done.
While all of this was going on, many people who couldn't bear to see children harmed began filing a formal petition on change.org with one clear goal: to deplatform Toya Oracle and protect children. The petition called on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to remove Toya Oracle from all of their platforms entirely, and the exact words of the petition read, "Demand that social media platforms such as TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube take action now." Now, think about that for a second. What does it actually take for people to reach this point in filing a petition? It shows Toya has deteriorated to the point of no return. And more specifically, that does not happen because someone said something careless or poorly worded. That happens when people genuinely believe that a child could be put in danger by what is being said. For instance, according to childlight.org, over 300 million are being harmed by pornography exposure every year. And when you look at the scale of that damage, the cases occur at a rate of 10 per second, meaning children are already being destroyed. And yet Toya is out here advocating that we expose them to even more pornography. That's ridiculous. As ridiculous as that might be, when compared to what happened to Tony Lopez, who faced several allegations of pedophilia, you will come to understand just how dangerous people like this are to society. Tony Lopez wasn't just accused of pedophilia. He was hit with a lawsuit in January of 2021 by 2 girls for sexual battery and emotional distress. That's the kind of damage these individuals can do when no one stops them. And when you look at Toya Oracle, at the pattern, the content, the ideology he's been pushing, he's already walking that same road. The only question is, who's going to stop him before the damage is done?
The problem with laws, rules, and regulations under a white supremacist patriarchal colonial system is that they are not rooted in reality. In Western societies, there is an established age of consent.
Meanwhile, people who already had been warning about Toya long before any of this reached the wider internet began resurfacing old call-out posts that many had missed entirely. One person produced a detailed rundown that tied the whole narrative together.
This man right here is one of the most peculiar genres of people that I've ever come across, and I want to talk about them. This man's name is Oracle, and the reason that I find him so interesting is because he has some of the most questionable to downright concerning takes that I've ever seen on the internet, and that is what I want to focus on, with the first one being that he believes that should be accessible to children, but not just that, should be making content geared towards children in order to educate them.
Those rundowns by the guy matter a lot, because this was not a creator who slipped up once and faced consequences. This was a pattern that people had been raising alarms about for a very long time, before it had ever reached the mainstream internet audience. In fact, one person posted a video calling him an actor.
Toya Oracle is the actors that everybody was trying to warn us about on TikTok that they place on here to essentially gauge and see our reactions and try to manipulate us into behaviors that is not acceptable or susceptible from our point of society's view. And they want us to accept behaviors that are essentially unacceptable, but acceptable for the elites. That's why they are placed here. That's why they are on the internet talking this craziness.
And after the viral backlash, petition, and call-out videos stacking up in the thousands, the one thing most people were waiting for was an apology, something that showed even a basic level of awareness about the harm his words had caused. However, Toya did not give them that. Instead, he did what he would do time and time again throughout this entire story. He reframed the situation entirely, turned it around, and suddenly he was the one being harassed.
I want to show you what actual predators look like and sound like. We are the victims here. We have always been the victims here through and through. We have never doxed anybody. Hello, this is a call out of Isalina from New York City, who has property in Los Frailes, Santo Domingo Este.
Suddenly, the people calling out his statements about children were the real problem, and he had been the victim and the most controversial person.
Another day and another bigot calling a black trans and queer person a child. So I've been called a controversial person for stating that children are human beings, and because they're human beings, they are also sexual beings because they have sexualities.
And for many people who had been watching closely, that response told them everything they needed to know. They found more reasons to be alarmed as the controversies continued to pile up. But if simply admitting that children should be free to explore sexuality already sounds extreme, then there are truly no words for what Toya did next. Because this guy didn't just shock people with his words, he left them genuinely confused.
Is this one.
If you are lighter than me, you are colorist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations.
In that video, Toya laid out his understanding of oppression in unimaginable ways. Anyone who has more than he is an abuser, and not just more money, but more food, more followers, and more of absolutely anything at all.
If you have more money, more material resources than me, then you are classist, and you owe me reparations. If you are American, then you are my imperialist.
And according to his logic, if you have more than him in any category, you're supposed to pay him monthly.
You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you are from the West, if you are of European descent, then you are racist.
And he didn't stop there. He continued calling out his so-called oppressors directly to demand these monthly payments, presenting the whole thing as though it were a perfectly reasonable and overdue correction of injustice. The internet took one look at all this and responded back to him in full force.
If you do not have multiple mental disorders and do not have to deal with that stigma, you are ableist, you are my oppressor, you owe me reparations. If you do not have to constantly deal with having multiple people in your head, you are a singlet, you are my oppressor, you owe me reparations. If you were able to fill your dream, if your dream was to sit on your ass.
Now, before going any further, it is worth being clear about one important thing. Reparations as a concept is a real and serious conversation, one with roots in centuries of historical injustice. We are talking about the kind of debate that was acknowledged after the Holocaust, when Germany paid billions to Jewish survivors and the State of Israel. We are talking about the kind of wrong that America itself recognized when it compensated Japanese Americans interned during World War II. This is a legitimate policy debate that has been happening at the highest levels for a very long time. Nobody here is dismissing that conversation. But that is simply not what Toya Oracle was talking about. What he was putting out was a personal demand directed at any random person who happened to own more than him in any area of life. Your neighbor with a bigger fridge owes you. A stranger on TikTok with more followers owes you. Anyone, anywhere with more of anything is automatically your oppressor and needs to start making monthly payments. That was the argument being made in full seriousness.
If you have a looser hair texture than me, then you are texturist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. I do not need your pity. I do not need your sympathy. And I do not need your guilt. I need you to acknowledge the position of power that you hold and use it to change the power dynamics in the relationship you have with me. You owe me reparations.
And the internet noticed. That logic wasn't just flawed, it was completely detached from reality, and people weren't about to let it slide.
And you owe me reparations. If you are thinner than me, you are fatphobic. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you have more money, more material resources than me, then you are classist, and you owe me reparations. If you are lighter than me, you are colorist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you are thinner than me, you are fatphobic. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations.
Meanwhile, others took their reparations, looking into extreme capitalism that happened way back.
Toya the Oracle reminds me of Nature Boy. Do y'all remember Nature Boy? That man who took a whole bunch of women somewhere, I do believe in Jamaica, and they were like living off a convent, and he believed in everyone being unclothed. Come to find out, he was like trapping these black women there, and there was something to do with children. They remind me a lot of each other because they use this idea of like anti-capitalism.
I keep seeing Toya Oracle pop up on my For You page, and I want to bitch about it because now it has to be your problem too. Toya Oracle, if you don't know, is a person who bitches about being oppressed every single day. They don't have a job, they're against capitalism, and they bitch about everything in life. My question is, people like Toya Oracle, how are they sustainable in the long run? Whenever I see these crazy, quirky, obnoxious, cringy people online, my question is, how will they be 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road?
These videos showed just how far the reparation video had spread. Other creators like Anastasia Garcia started making videos, calling their friends to demand reparations because they make more money than her.
Hello?
Hello?
So I just wanted to let you know that because you are employed and you make more money than I do, you're my oppressor and you owe me reparations. So I'm calling to see how you're gonna set up my monthly reparations.
Unfortunately, people stitched his videos with clips of their bosses and landlords. The concept had become a full-blown joke, the complete opposite of the impact Toya had clearly intended.
If you are lighter than me, you are colorist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you are thinner than me, you are fatphobic. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations.
If you are lighter than me, you are colorist. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations. If you are thinner than me, you are fatphobic. You are my oppressor, and you owe me reparations.
But one TikToker took it further. He went digging through Toya's Substack page, and what he found there was every bit as extreme, if not worse, than anything he had posted publicly on social media.
So in Toya Oracle's videos, he's always referencing his Substack. So I decided to take a look over there and just see what he's talking about. And it's basically his videos, but in written form. So we're going to read one of these entries together. Also, most of his Substack entries are very, very long. This was the shortest one I could find. So depending on how well this does, I'll go and read the other ones. The violence of colonialism started at first contact. Every day, I think about the fact that there were so many people I should have never been in contact with for my safety.
On that Substack, Toya had written at length about colonialism and indigenous ways of living. But one post in particular stood out. He wrote that his preferred state of being was complete nudity, and questioned why he should be forced to live in a society that would punish him for simply not wearing clothes.
When do we not take you? My preferred state of being is nudity. Oh Lord, Toya. What does it mean for me to be forced to live in societies where I could be punished for not wearing clothes? It means death. You are such a drama queen. We all live in the same society with you, and we all wear clothes, and we're not dead, so I think you'll manage. Also, they have nudist groups and little nudist areas.
The writing matched the videos perfectly, and it was, at that point, with the Substack laid bare as evidence, that the comedy finally ran out. What was underneath it was no longer funny at all.
If that's what you want, there are designated spaces for that. I do not want inclusion. I want the end of this colonial system. I want to revoke the state's access to me.
Because looking at it closely, this was not just a series of bad takes and posts on social media for attention. This was a complete and fixed worldview, a belief system in which Toya was always the most oppressed person in every situation he found himself in, and where accountability applied to everyone around him, but never to himself. Now, while Toya was busy demanding reparations from strangers, he was also leaning heavily into another part of his public identity. That is, claiming he was disabled and unable to work, support himself, and was entirely dependent on the goodwill of the people around him.
As a deep dark-skinned, fat black, trans-disabled person is all that matters. So if you are not interested in pleasing me in all the ways, financially, emotionally, physically, sexually, spiritually, intellectually, then you have no business being in my life. You have no business.
That claim quickly became the foundation for almost everything he demanded. In Toya's view, if you did not accept the specific way he framed his disability, then you had no right to remain in his life. But what made the situation even more compelling was what happened next. People began digging up his old videos from years earlier, clips of him growing up, moving freely, living normally. And in those recordings, there was no visible indication of the disability he now insisted had always defined him.
I stand here waiting for you to play the gong. To crash a critic saying, is it right or is it wrong?
While the community was already watching with raised eyebrows, something even more damaging surfaced. His own mother was captured in a video with Toya, stating directly that he was not disabled.
You need to call the cops on your own child when you know what happens to black people in this country.
You want to go viral, girl. That's what you did.
What do you mean?
Disability when you
oh,
claiming all these things being
now I'm pretending to be disabled.
Yes.
I'm pretending to be disabled.
You want to go viral so you can have lots
of views. Apparently you want to go viral. You want to go viral. You want to go viral.
Now, when even his own mother with a medical background who knows him better than anyone could openly admit that the disability claim was just a stunt to go viral, that tells you everything you need to know about how manipulative he truly is.
She wants to go live, and have many likes, many views. That's what she wants.
Yep, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I want for my mother. For my mother to call the cops on me. For my mother to threaten to call the cops on me. So that's what I want.
You are fake. Fake.
Mm-hmm.
You are completely fake.
Mm-hmm.
Claiming disability.
And through his tone in the video, you can hear just how angry he was the moment someone finally told him the truth. At least we know that Toya could walk up and down the stairs by himself, showing he wasn't crippled and can handle himself.
The office,
yeah,
when you can walk up and down and do everything.
Okay.
You purchase your food every day on.
Oh wow! Oh wow! So I'm trying to survive. You're upset because I'm trying to survive. That's what you're upset about. That's what you're upset about. That I'm trying to survive.
Go fund me every day. No.
You're upset that I'm trying to survive, and I'm fake. I'm fake. I'm faking my disability.
Yes, you are. Yes.
And I'm buying food to eat.
And as their conversation continued in that chaotic atmosphere, her mother revealed something else that made the entire narrative even harder to defend. She was willing to buy him $1 million house, yet Toya refused because he wants to milk the community.
That you don't even fucking eat. You're so upset. You're so obsessed with being thin that you can't eat, that you don't even fucking eat. And you expect me to starve with you. You expect me to starve with you. And I'm not gonna starve. I'm going to fucking eat. Oh wow. Oh wow, what a crime.
So on one hand, Toya had a mother who was a medical professional with the financial means to provide him with serious housing support. And on the other hand, he was online telling the world that he was a disabled person with no access to resources. However, beyond this, Toya's entitlement mentally is so disgusting when you discover what he did to her aunt.
So Toya asked their auntie for a television, and their auntie was like, I'll get you the TV as long as you promise to work out for 30 minutes. Toya tells their aunt, I will work out for 30 minutes. The aunt gets the TV for Toya. Toya receives the TV. Toya blocks the aunt. She's pretty much saying, like, how the fuck dare you tell me that I need to work out for 30 minutes to get a TV? You're rich. Just get the fucking TV. Which I understand. But we don't live in a society where everybody just gets things just because they exist. Like,
when you look at the way that Toya responded to her aunt, what you're seeing is someone who wants to enjoy the fruits of other people's labor without putting in any of the work himself. And all her aunt had asked, genuinely and reasonably, was for her to work out for just 30 minutes, especially considering that 3 hours of regular exercise could have actually made a real difference. But when Toya was pressed on why he had blocked his own aunt, there was no apology, not even close. He simply doubled down, standing firm in his belief that he was right and that reparations were still owed to him.
For leaving my relatives and then blocking me, I made sure that they heard my fucking mouth. I made sure that they knew what they did to me and that they could not escape the guilt and shame from what they did to me. And I also made sure to leave with monthly reparations. Anybody can.
Despite Toya presenting himself as a displaced and oppressed person, something else surfaced online about him. Someone who knew him pointed out that Toya had actually been a landlord himself. He owned a brownstone in Brooklyn and had been leasing out rooms from it. At first, it seemed like a false accusation, but upon closer examination, the truth began to surface, backed by receipts listing his old name as a registered owner. And when the community saw it, they called him out to explain himself. And what Toya said was one of the craziest things ever heard.
The basis of Adeyanju's smear campaign, which is that I was a landlord. Mind you, that is a lie. Adeyanju was my roommate. I paid $1,400 in rent, and Adeyanju paid $1,100 in rent. The only person that had desires of being a landlord were Adeyanju, and here's why. Landlords about fixing things in the house that were breaking. For example, when our stove broke, I contacted.
Unfortunately, instead of coming forward with the truth, Toya lied, twisting the entire story, seemingly convinced that he could deceive the community. He even posted another video claiming he had simply rented the house for his cousin.
Energy to New York City, where I was a native resident. I was renting an apartment from my relatives. It is common in New York City for Black folks, especially marginalized Black folks, to rent from people we know because of the discriminatory practices in housing. A lot of Black people, especially queer and trans people, especially queer and trans disabled people, live with relatives. Actually, there's a statistic that 50% of disabled people live with their relatives. So yes.
By any account, Toya's story simply does not add up. If his mother bought the house for his sister, why is his name on the deed? That's no minor detail, that's the whole case. It sounds less like a gift for his sister and more like a house bought for him. It's almost insulting that Toya believed that people would just take his word for it, especially when the proof pointed to the exact opposite direction.
I was a delivery driver, and I was also blogging online, trying to secure income for myself after having lost my teaching job due to anti-Blackness and ableism. And then when I got injured from my delivery job, I switched over to crowdfunding full-time.
If the disability controversy showed how far Toya would go to exploit personal struggles, what came next was even more disturbing. Toya Oracle began regularly making claims and statements that framed his personal experiences as genocide. Not as oppression, systematic discrimination, or even as severe abuse, but genocide. Now, when we talk about genocide, we're referring to the deliberate, systematic destruction of a people. This is one of the most serious and specific words in the human rights vocabulary. For example, during the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazi regime. And in Rwanda, in 1994, nearly 1 million Tutsi people were slaughtered in just 100 days. This word carries a legal definition, a historical weight, and a human cost is almost impossible to fully comprehend. But Toya's application of the word is something else entirely. In his world, losing a job is genocide. Being displaced from a house is genocide. Moving to a new city is genocide. Any inconvenience, setback, or unfavorable outcome is genocide. And when you sit with that for a moment, what it really exposes is just how lazy and irresponsible Toya's thinking has become. Not just intellectually lazy, but dangerously so, because trivializing a word like that is an insult to every single person who actually lived through it. And he did not use the word once in a moment of heightened emotion. He used it regularly and repeated it across multiple videos. And the Palestinian communities who actually survived genocide found it deeply offensive and minimizing, so they pushed back.
In fact, it does a lot more harm than good. Another take that they had, which I thought was pretty crazy, was when he compared children in Palestine getting killed to him having to live in the United States. Now, I don't mean to get political here, but maybe, just maybe, watching your family members get slaughtered in front of you is a little bit more hard to go through than you sitting on your ass at home every day complaining on the internet.
What made it worse was how it fit into his broader pattern of behavior. Every tool in Toya's arsenal seemed to serve one purpose: to position himself as the most victimized, oppressed, and deserving of sympathy and resources in any given situation. However, Toya went even further, setting up a GoFundMe campaign that raised $3,182 and invited people to donate money under the claim that the funds would support victims of genocide. But in Toya's mind, he was the victim. He wasn't just asking for support, he was framing his own personal controversy as genocide, and that comparison left a lot of people speechless. Interestingly, it wasn't just a single GoFundMe campaign that Toya created. Across multiple platforms, he launched several fundraisers under different names. Yet they all carried essentially the same message. One page he wrote, "Urgent. Urgent that survivors need funds for housing." On another, he used the name Healing Fund, this time with the caption August Update, Land and Healing for Genocide Survivors. The pattern was hard to ignore. Different identities, but the same approach to money. It painted the picture of someone who genuinely believed the world owed him a living, simply for existing.
If you're seeing this video, it's because you have the opportunity to save the lives of 2 Black trans people, one of which is physically disabled. I need your help raising $1,613 to meet my goal so I can put a deposit down on an apartment. Because I have to somehow raise enough money to put a deposit down on an apartment that I can't seem to find yet. Sibai and I still need y'all's help with raising funds to get an apartment. We've been having a very difficult time apartment hunting.
What made all the drama even crazier was when a TikTok account known as Exposing Sounds from Janen started posting how Toya Oracle was living under different names. As shocking as that claim sounded, it was later verified to be true. After noticing that people had begun to catch on to his use of multiple names, Toya attempted to set the record straight, but even his explanation only exposed him as a blatant liar.
An admittance of guilt. And the people behind the page Exposing the Shrine House have accused me of everything under the sun, and yet they are enacting the actual behaviors that they are accusing me of. Let's talk about the doxing that's happening. So they have a list of all of my names, my former usernames, etc., on their page. And in addition to that, they were trying to compromise the safety of myself and my friend, Siba, who's a black trans femme.
Fair enough, everything covered so far had revealed a consistent pattern. The entitlement, manipulation, and endless victimhood. But what Toya got involved in next took it to a completely different level. Toya Oracle was publicly known to be in a relationship with a 23-year-old man named Seba. Toya was 31.
My name is Seba, and I was in a relationship with Toya for almost 2 years.
A commercial society that created, the category of children as a human. How dare you, as a kid that just came into this world, already
have desires.
Yeah, and want so much.
Who taught you how to have sex? Because sex is a skill. How are young people supposed to learn how to do those things if they have no examples of it? And again, I offer you that can be a space where young people can learn how to perform sexual acts.
Interestingly, this raised questions about the dynamic of that relationship, particularly given the age gap. However, Toya posted a response to it, dismissing the concern, but drew its own wave of criticism from people who felt that the relationship deserved serious scrutiny.
She is in her mid-20s and I am in my early 30s. She willingly chose to be in a relationship to me. She chose to house me when I was homeless. She chose to travel with me. She chose to take care of me. She chose to be my friend. She chose to repair harm after we separated because she harmed me.
Meanwhile, it got hot when many people started responding to him.
It really doesn't sound willing when you say that, when you pair that with your phrase talking about Seba repairing harm that they caused you. What it sounds like is you guilt trip them into making them financially responsible of you, right? That's what you wanted her to be? Seba, heart to heart for a minute. If you really do feel financially responsible for this person, none of us can stop you. However, if they guilt tripped you into feeling like the way that you currently do.
But the age gap itself was not the only dimension of this drama. What gave it a much more serious weight was a separate, fully documented situation involving a 19-year-old who went by Fed Jacket on Twitter. And what emerged from their public posts went far beyond a disagreement. You lied about finding me housing after I blocked you on everything due to trans misogyny, and you trying to force a deeper connection with me. And you can't take no as an answer, so you go to Twitter to cry how I, 19, preyed on you, 31. Let's post receipts. After being blocked on every platform, Toya allegedly obtained a separate number and used it to continue contacting someone who had explicitly told him to leave her alone. And that person, a teenager, was forced to retract her crowdfunding request for her own safety, because the connection to Toya had made her feel endangered rather than supported. So when you look at all of it together, the situation about children, the reparation demands, the fake disability, and the trivializing of genocide, what you're left with is a picture of a man who used the language of liberation to gain access to people, and then used those people until they had nothing left to give. And for now, Toya Oracle has gone quiet. The accounts have been banned. And the platform he had spent years building had been taken down piece by piece by the very community he claimed to be a part of. Whether he returns under another name, with another persona, and another round of manipulation designed to draw people in, only time will tell. So, if you found this video useful, make sure you subscribe and leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comment section below, because this is a conversation that deserves to keep going.